All right, this is going to be the second video here in continuation with my mixed media study. I've let this dry a little bit, and now we're really going to be thinking about transitions. And I'm still not really happy with how harsh of a line this is, and so I want to start thinking about some visual transitions and a few things that I like to consider. One would be the use of some different gel mediums. These are just some samples. This is the matte gel that you can see. It's slightly raised above the surface. The modeling paste. Here is blended fibers, white opaque flakes, string gel is a little bit glossier, and then ceramic stucco. One of the things that I like the best would probably be the matte gel, the modeling paste, or the blended fibers. It just seems to be a little bit more neutral of a texture. You can see definitely the modeling paste is what gives you the greatest dimension. So applying some of these with a palette knife around some of your edges and then painting over them is a way to kind of transition out. Another thing that I like to use sometimes is just different types of handmade papers. I really like this because it has a ton of different line quality to it in terms of the visible strings. And so oftentimes I will just go to the art store and look for some different handmade papers. But thinking about collaging this down with the matte medium, and again, then just painting over it to kind of disguise it. So I think that's what I'm going to do with this one. I'm going to use my matte medium again. And it still has a little bit of tone to it, so I'm just going to paint over that. And I really like the line quality that the string and this paper in particular gives it. And again, anytime you're using some different media, it's always a really good idea to try to repeat it at least a few times, again, to create unity. So let's see, I might put just a little bit up here. And you can see I'm kind of still tinting it a little bit so that it is not so bright white, but it still has a little bit of light quality to it. And maybe right there. And I can still go back in with my matte medium and get it a little bit darker if I chose to, but I think I'll leave it alone for now. Okay, so just kind of helping to disguise some of the edges of my photographic elements. You can see this a little bit right here. The next step that I like to try to consider is the use of stencils. And you can kind of see this is actually the opposite stencil that I used before. But I like to just use partial areas of a stencil to create a little bit more dimension and depth. I have a couple of different ones over here that I was going to play around with. But when you're using a stencil, you definitely want to use one of these. They're a bristle brush, but they're a little bit coarser. They're much stiffer of a bristle, and you can really pounce the paint in a lot more effectively. I'm going to take a little bit of that kind of creamy color that I had earlier. I'm mixing it over here, and I'm going to lay my stencil on, pick up some paint. I'm kind of pouncing it in. I don't have a very strong color right now because I want it to be very subtle. That's looking pretty good. I just like it to be a little bit of a surprise, a little bit of an implied texture that you kind of see as just one more of the parts of layering. Okay, so you could switch directions if you wanted to. Again, I'm gonna put a few here and there. You could switch colors even. Another thing that I like to use for texture is tulle. And I like to use this like a stencil a lot of times. I think it's got a really nice, lovely color to it, or pattern. Sorry, not the color. I'm gonna add a little bit of pink in here. You can kind of see that nice texture. If you just brush it on, it's not going to have as detailed of a line quality to it. Okay, so I'm just taking this and repeating just a few places. I could brush it, but it's really not going to have as much detail to it. Okay, so here are just a few. You can kind of see that pattern. But those are some things that I like to use as transition pieces. So this piece is not done by any means, but you can kind of see how I began to develop the layers and are starting to make everything look more cohesive. It's still a little bit busy here. I think I'm going to go back in and use a little bit more matte medium and try to make this area recede just a little bit more.